Hello, and welcome to the National University Site Support Provider Training Session. We would like to thank you for your willingness to support a student teacher or intern. Our clinical practice program would not be possible without teachers like you. Topics covered in this training include philosophy of student clinical practice, goal of the clinical practice program, glossary of terms, student teaching policies, teaching performance expectations, evaluation practices, responsibilities of the site support provider, proposed sequencing for student teaching, California Teaching Performance Assessment, and suggested observation techniques. The clinical practice program at National University provides an opportunity to develop and evaluate the student's competence in an actual school setting. Clinical practice is intended to bridge theory and practice. The relationship among University Support Provider, USP, Site Support Provider, SSP, and student teacher or intern influences the quality of the clinical practice experience. The student teachers and interns need competent and concerned support to help them assume the full range of duties of a teacher. You, as the site support provider, are a vital influence in the candidate's professional growth and development. The primary goal of the clinical practice program is to provide student teachers and interns a challenging, relevant, and rewarding experience, which will allow them to acquire professional competence. This includes the ability to understand the role and operation of the school, respect and work effectively with students of varying backgrounds and cultures, and assume the various responsibilities of the classroom teacher. In addition, candidates learn to plan instruction and learning experiences which recognize the individual needs and differences of students. They organize and manage the classroom environment to maximize learning. They manage classroom interactions and student conduct to create a positive climate for learning, and they identify and use appropriate instructional techniques and technology. While in clinical practice, candidates will also learn to evaluate learning to determine the extent to which instructional objectives are achieved by students, establish positive and effective communication with students, parents, colleagues, administrators, and community members, accept and assume the responsibilities associated with being a competent professional and lifelong learner, and recognize and practice being a reflective teacher. Here are some terms you will hear throughout this training. ITL stands for Inspired Teaching and Learning. This is the student's educational program. GoReact is a video coaching app. SSP stands for Site Support Provider, On-Site Master Teacher. TPAs are the Teaching Performance Assessments. These are state assessments. TPEs are the Teaching Performance Expectations, University Observation and Assessment Criteria. USP is the University Support Provider, which is a National University Supervisor. Student teacher placements. Student teachers are required to complete 18 weeks or 1 semester of clinical practice under the supervision of a classroom teacher with a clear credential in their subject area. The 18 weeks can be divided into 2 9-week blocks with different placements. Revised UC guidelines allow the candidates to remain in one assignment for the entire 18 weeks as well. National University will accept either option at the discretion of the local school district. Student teaching policies regarding attendance. Student teachers are expected to be in attendance every day for the full day. Daily arrival and departure times will follow the daily schedule of the site support provider. Only 3 absences, whether for illness or personal reasons, are allowed. All other absences must be made up. Student teaching policies regarding problems. Students who enroll in student teaching make a commitment to the goals, responsibilities, and expectations outlined in this guide. The following procedure should be used when a student teacher has difficulty fulfilling these responsibilities. An initial communication on the matter between the site support provider and the student teacher should be held with an opportunity to improve. Documentation of the communication is imperative. You will be sending the university support provider an email every 2 weeks. In your biweekly updates, be sure to include all concerns and how you are providing support. If the problem is not resolved, the SSP should contact the university support provider and arrange a conference with the student teacher, the SSP, and the USP as soon as possible. At this meeting, we will establish a candidate success plan. Notify the university support provider immediately if there are grounds for dismissal. Use of student teachers as substitutes. National University allows student teachers to substitute teach as part of their student teaching experience according to the following criteria or guidelines. Student teachers may substitute teach only in the classroom in which they are student teaching. The substitute teaching must not conflict with USP's visits. A site support provider is given an honorarium of $300 for each full-time 9-week placement. National University will send a check in the name of your school district. Check with your district to find out how they disperse our payments. Teaching performance expectations. The TPEs are organized by 6 California standards for the teaching profession domains. Detail about expectations for beginning teacher knowledge and performance is provided through TPE elements within each of the 6 CSTP domains. In supporting all students in learning, creating and maintaining effective environments for student learning, understanding and organizing subject matter for student learning, planning instruction and designing learning experiences for all students, assessing student learning, and developing as a professional educator. This slide demonstrates an overview of the university support provider's requirements for student teachers. This slide represents an overview of university support provider requirements for interns. University support providers will be responsible for all formal observations. USPs may or may not be present in the classroom for the observations. All observations must be recorded and uploaded to GoReact. GoReact is a video coaching and resource sharing platform designed to improve teaching and learning. The areas of observation will be aligned to the teaching performance expectations. GoReact, the video coaching program, will not be a part of your responsibility. The next few slides will give you an idea of how the video coaching works just for your information. Each lesson recorded will be annotated. Annotations will cover connections in the lesson with the TPEs. Attachments can be added as support documents. Comments will include TPEs, suggestions, and questions. Evaluation procedures. Site support providers are to complete assessments as arranged with the university support provider. It is the responsibility of the SSP and USP to ensure that the candidate receives timely and continuous feedback on his or her performance. The student or intern recommended for certification must possess the skills and maturity to be a successful teacher. These assessments provide the SSP and USP with opportunities to identify the strengths and weaknesses of a candidate. These reports profile the student's competency in subject matter, instruction, assessment, and professionalism. The formative assessment is submitted by the SSP to the USP in the candidate's last week of their 550A placement. This report is an evaluation of the student-teacher's performance and relays important information about competencies. It must include evidence of the candidate progress based upon the targets of the TPEs. The goal is to help move the student teacher or intern to the next level, and include recommendations to help them move along the continuum of practice. The summative assessment is submitted by the SSP to the USP in the candidate's last week of their 550B placement. This report is an evaluation of the candidate's performance and relays important information about the competencies. It must include evidence of candidate progress based on the targets of the TPEs. The goal is for a candidate to be at acceptable levels in all TPEs, but not necessarily each element. As a site support provider, you are responsible to collaborate with the candidate in filling out the TPE running record. This record is used to guide and support the student teacher or intern throughout the placement. It also serves as evidence of meeting TPEs. This comes in handy when completing the assessments that require evidence to be provided. It must be included with each email update. By using the TPE running record as a Google Doc, the SSP candidate and USP all have access to it and can monitor, comment, and/or add information. For example, note the comment on the right where the USP was able to help the candidate add evidence to the document. Every 2 weeks, student teachers SSPs will send an email with the TPE running record document or Google Doc link, as well as their own insight on the student teacher's progress. Another important part of the biweekly email is to inform the USP of any issues that need support. We need to know as soon as possible about any concerns. Intern site support providers will send an email every month with the TPE running record document or Google Doc link, as well as their own insight on the intern's progress. Another important part of the monthly email is to inform the USP of any issues that need support. Again, we need to know as soon as possible about any concerns. Responsibilities of the site support provider of student teachers includes preparing pupils to work with a student teacher and notify the parents that there will be a student teacher in the classroom, provide a working area for the student teacher, a desk or table, and share responsibilities whenever possible, accepting him or her as a co-worker and professional person. They should acquaint the student teacher with pertinent school policies and regulations, philosophy, priorities, and assessment criteria. Site support providers should immediately involve the student teacher in specific classroom tasks. They should plan a schedule with the student teacher for assuming responsibilities of the classroom, which will allow the student teacher to assume increasing responsibility as he or she exhibits readiness to do so. They should require the student teacher to be solely responsible for all planning, preparation, instruction, and evaluation for a minimum of 2 weeks at the end of each course. SSP should guide the student teacher in preparing daily lesson plans, unit plans, and tests, approve and critique all plans before they are taught, assist in understanding and applying evaluation techniques. They should demonstrate a variety of effective teaching techniques and arrange for visits to other classrooms from time to time. They should guide the student teacher in developing and understanding the skills of self-evaluation. Student teacher site support providers should evaluate the quality of the student teacher's performance and engage in frequent conferences with the student teacher to ensure continuous progress and/or early identification of problems. They should help the student teacher relate theory to practice and keep a record of attendance and tardiness of the student teacher. If absent or tardiness are observed, report this to the university support provider. Student teacher site support providers should develop a confidential mentoring relationship with the student teacher. They should establish regular meetings with the student teacher to reflect on teaching practices and to support professional growth. Meetings are arranged to meet the needs of both the support provider and the student teacher and may be held at the school site, over the phone, or by video or via email. They should conduct ongoing communication, which may include observations during each of the 30-day periods. Informal discussions and consultations should be ongoing and frequent. Support providers should complete the individual induction plan with the student teacher. The student teacher candidate will upload the individual induction plan into the candidate's clinical practice course. They should also complete the competency log with the student teacher. The student teacher candidate will upload the completed competency log into the candidate's clinical practice Blackboard course. Site support providers should maintain collaboration with a national university support provider by meeting a minimum of 4 times during the 18 weeks with the NUSP. Recommendations for giving feedback when evaluating performance. Site support providers should establish a routine time and place for collaboration. They should offer immediate feedback. Feedback as close to the events as possible helps communicate relevance. They should create notes to record ideas during observation. Use them as a guide to direct discussions. Site support providers should encourage candidate self-assessment and reflection. When opportune, encourage reteaching. Be firm and fair in providing needed corrective feedback. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing now requires that all those who will support candidates in the field complete hours of professional development. The hours are to focus on topics such as adult learning, coaching, and instructional strategies for all learners. Other hours focus on the specific practices of National University. Once you get the readings and activities, you are then qualified to be a site support provider for any university that is part of the Intersegmental Project. Student teachers should gradually assume all duties of the teacher. It is important that the student teacher be left alone in the classroom periodically. Here are some suggestions for sequencing the student teaching experience. During the first week of student teaching, you should allow opportunities to observe your class, other teachers, and become to the school. Candidates should teach a small group of students. During weeks 2 and 3, candidates should participate in co-planning, co-teaching of 1 to 2 subject areas and classes, providing small or large group instruction, gradually increasing responsibilities and decreasing dependency on the supervising teacher, evaluate student teachers' daily plans for approval and improvements, evaluate progress and give frequent feedback, continue to model effective teaching techniques and strategies. During weeks 4 through 5, multiple subject candidates should assume responsibility for 2 subject areas. Single subject candidates should assume responsibility for 1 class period. Evaluate student teachers' daily plans for approval and improvements, and evaluate progress and give frequent feedback. During weeks 6 through 9, multiple subject candidates should assume responsibility for 3 to 4 subject areas. Single subject candidates should assume responsibility for 2 to 3 class periods. Site support providers should evaluate student teachers' daily plans for approval and improvements, evaluate progress and give frequent feedback, continue to increase responsibilities and decrease dependency on the supervising teacher, have the student complete the last 2 weeks of full-time teaching, and complete formative assessments based on their current performance and share it with the student teacher. Weeks 10 through 16. If the student is beginning a new placement, follow the procedures outlined for weeks 1 through 9. If the candidate is remaining in the same placement, for multiple subject candidates, continue to assume more teaching responsibility. For single subject candidates, teach 3 to 4 class periods. Site support providers should evaluate student teachers' daily plans for approval and improvements, and continuously evaluate progress and give feedback as they assume more duties. During weeks 17 and 18, the site support provider should evaluate student teachers' daily plans for approval and improvements, have students complete independently the last 2 weeks of student teaching, and complete the summative assessment and discuss with the student teacher. Candidates are required to participate in seminars which are held online after school hours. The seminars will focus on the California Teaching Performance Assessments. They will have assignments to complete, including recording lessons in the classroom. California Teaching Performance Assessments are a state-mandated assessment for multiple and single-subject credential program candidates. TPA Instructional Cycle 1 represents a complete teaching cycle: plan, teach, and assess, reflect, and apply, for one content-specific lesson that student teachers will develop and teach. TPA Instructional Cycle 2 represents a complete teaching cycle: plan, teach, and assess, reflect, and apply, on a learning segment of 3 to 5 lessons. This cycle emphasizes the interaction between standards, assessment, and instructional decision-making. The next 2 slides cover an overview of TPA Cycle 1 and TPA Cycle 2 and each of the steps involved. Here are suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers beginning of class activities. Did the class start on time? How long after? Was there a bell to start class? How long did attendance take? What did the students do during this time? Were the students in their seats when the bell rang? Which of these techniques did you like? How would you have done things differently? These are suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' daily objectives. Was an objective for this class period given? What was it? When was it stated? Was the objective measurable? Was there a link to prior knowledge? Was it evident that the teacher had objectives for this class period? Continuing with daily objectives, did the class or teacher digress from objectives? Were the objectives reached by the end of the period? If not, why not? Did the closure include a summary of the objectives? Which of these techniques did you like? How would you have done things differently? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' directions. How were directions given? Was everyone listening? How did the teacher get everyone's attention? Was the teacher clear? Was the teacher concise? Continuing with suggestions for directions, what was the noise level during directions? What was the body posture of the student during directions? Did the student seem to understand the directions? Did the teacher check for understanding? How? Were the directions given more than once? How would you change the presentation of the same directions? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers around expectations. Were there stated expectations? Were they clear? Were they reasonable? Did the student seem to already know what was expected? Did the student's behavior correspond with stated expectations? Did the expectations help the student focus on the desired outcomes? How would you have stated the expectations differently? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers during discussion presentation. How did the student give input? Raise hands, call out, no response? How effective was the student input? If more than one type of student input was observed, which seemed to be most effective and why? Did the learning remain focused? Did the teacher digress? Did the students digress? How did the teacher bring them back together again? Continuing with discussion presentation. What percentage of the hour was lecture? Did the teacher use active participation? List examples. What was the noise level for each kind of presentation used? Did you observe cooperative learning? For the lesson being presented, what presentation mode would you have used? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' pacing. Did the period move along smoothly? What did the teacher do to maintain or pick up the energy level? How did the teacher challenge the students? What did the teacher do to make the lesson interesting? What novelty type activities did the teacher use? Would these teaching techniques be something that you might use? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' sequencing. Did the lesson go from known to unknown? Did the lesson go from simple to complex? Did the lesson go step by step? Did the student seem to follow and understand the lesson? Could you follow and understand the lesson? Did the teacher monitor and adjust the lesson? How did he or she adjust the lesson? How would you have done it differently? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' motivation. What motivational techniques did you observe? Was there any creativity in the presentation? What additional motivational techniques do you plan to use? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' classroom management of materials. How were the materials distributed? What was the noise level? Was the process efficient? Did the students have their own materials with them? Did the students have their own textbook, or were they distributed in class? Did all the students have a pencil? If not, how did the teacher handle this? Continuing with classroom management of materials, was there a homework assignment due that day? How many students either forgot it or did not do it? How did the teacher react? Were there disruptions caused by students who did not have materials? How would you handle distribution of materials in class? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers, technology in the classroom. What technology was used in the lesson? How smooth was the operation or use of these? Did the use of technology effectively contribute to the lessons? What apps or programs can you recommend? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers, student behaviors. What student disruptions did you observe? What evidence of off-task behaviors did you observe? Continuing with behavior management, what positive reinforcement did the teacher use? What negative reinforcement did the teacher use? Is the tone of the classroom affected by the choice of the reinforcement used? Did the teacher sometimes ignore good behavior? Did the teacher sometimes ignore bad behavior? With regard to student behaviors, were individual behavior problems addressed in front of the whole class or privately? Did the teacher use any nonverbal discipline techniques? What were they? List some positive responses used by the teacher. List some negative responses used by the teacher. What was the overall tone of the class? Wrapping up student behaviors. Were there more positive or negative responses by the teacher? Did the teacher response, either positive or negative, seem to fit the behavior of the students? About a particular discipline problem, what went wrong? How did the teacher respond? Did the student's behavior then change for the better? What might you have done differently? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' nonverbal communication. What nonverbal teacher behavior did you observe? How effective were they? What nonverbal student behaviors did you observe? Did the teacher respond? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' grading policy. Are grades mentioned during class? Do grades seem to motivate good students' participation or behavior? How are daily grades recorded during class, privately or publicly? Who hands back graded student papers in class? Do students grade one another's papers in class? If so, does the teacher give specific direction as to how to mark them? Are grades an integral part of this class? How do you feel about the confidentiality of grades? What are the advantages and disadvantages of grading papers during class? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' ending of class activities. What did the teacher do for closure? Was there a summary? Who contributed, teacher and/or students? Did closure include a check for understanding? Did you have a sense that the teacher was aware of the time and trying to wrap up for a good ending? Did the class have an ending or did it just stop? Was dismissal rowdy or quiet? How would you have dismissed the class? Suggested observation techniques for supervising teachers' learning styles. In what ways did the teacher employ visual learning? In what ways did the teacher employ audio learning? In what ways did the teacher employ kinesthetic learning? Give an example of how you could employ all three learning styles in your teaching. Thank you once again for your willingness to support a student teacher or intern. Our program greatly depends on teachers like you.